And so what we started to learn over time is that the biomedical model, it's great. We need to look at the biology of a person, their genes, their current health state, right? We do need to look at clients' blood work or patients' blood work. We do need to look at the various tests that are available to assess the state of someone's health. But we also need to assess the state of someone's psychological health and social health. In other words, your behavior and your environment, who you hang out with, what you do. And I want to tell you something. Part of what we do is influenced by how our childhood was.
Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast, where it's all about taking control of your health, losing fat, transforming your body, and living the life you deserve with celebrity fitness trainer and longevity enthusiast, Ted Rice. Do you ever feel like there's more to health and longevity than just exercise or diet? Well, I hope you do, because that's what the data show. And in today's episode, I'm going to share a personal story of how the tragedies that I've been through in my life, some of the defining moments, how they shaped my philosophy on health and longevity. And with the hopes that you come away of understanding health and longevity better for yourself and to look at your life a little bit differently and to ultimately get better results with your health. So that's the goal of today. What's up, my friend? Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Rice, health expert and coach to entrepreneurs, executives, and other high-performing professionals. We produce this show for two reasons. Number one, I've been in the health and fitness business for 24 years now, and I've learned a lot of lessons. And unfortunately, I followed a lot of people who, well, let's just say had more confidence than results that they delivered through their information. So what I want to do is provide you with the best, most actionable information on health and longevity on the internet. The second thing is that I'm a coach. And if you know the value of coaching because you've experienced in other areas of your own life, and you're looking for someone to help you create as much success with your health as you have with your career or business, you'll know who to hire. So let's dive in. I haven't talked about my personal story in a while. And if you've heard the story before, well, you're about to hear it again. But if you don't know my personal story, I had a few tragedies that really defined my life. The first one was my mother died in a car accident when I was 14 years old, and she was mentally ill. And I won't go into the full drama there, but it put me into high school. It put me in a rocky place emotionally as I was just entering high school. And as I started to pull my life together after getting into drugs, being high on marijuana every day could be high on marijuana, drinking all the time, and making it through high school barely and getting in trouble with the law. A lot of things happened in high school. I did make it to college eventually. And as I started to turn my life around, my 9-year-old brother, just as I was going into, I think it was my second year in college, my 9-year-old brother was kidnapped and murdered. And it was one of those tragedies, one of those stories. It made national news. My parents actually got laws enacted in Florida and even nationally, and it was a big deal. And even if you Google my brother's name, Jimmy Rice, R-Y-C-E, which I don't recommend, but if you just have to know, you can find some information on what happened. Just be ready for a bit of a tearjerker. I really don't recommend reading it too much because it's one of those real life horror stories like Silence of the Lambs type of thing, where it's just better not to know about it. And I share this with you because those events made me look at health and fitness differently and how I coach my clients differently. And unfortunately, the tragedy didn't end there. So my brother was kidnapped and murdered at 19, and I became a fitness professional at 22. But 14 years later, my sister committed suicide. And certainly, as you can imagine, it had to do with what we had been through as children and the emotional challenges that we went through, the PTSD or the unresolved PTSD. So as I started to mature in my views on health and fitness, because initially I worked out because I wanted to look good for meeting women. I wanted girls to think I was handsome and buff and sexy and attractive. And I wanted guys to think I was cool too. And I thought it was all about exercise and then eventually diet. But the conversation about sleep, about emotional health, about social health, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, now we know they're as important as diet and exercise, even though they're not talked about in the same way or to the same extent as diet and exercise. But we're learning this stuff is super important. And more recently, I started realizing, wow, the societal view of health and longevity is really messed up. It's really a mess. On one side, you have people who look at Instagram fitness people who are often taking drugs or doing diets that just are unsustainable. Their social life sucks. They have no sex drive because they're not doing well. It's not healthy, in other words, but it looks great, especially if you have some nice lighting, if you have some filters and you put them in a nice outfit, a matching color coordinated outfit. It looks great. But what I want to tell you is this. I was in what many people would say excellent shape in my 20s. And as I told you, brother was kidnapped and murdered at 19. In my 20s, I did not receive treatment for PTSD. And I looked like I was in great shape. I was lean. I had muscle mass. My clients, I was a personal trainer then. They hired me because of the way I looked. But emotionally, I was actually a mess. I had symptoms of PhD. I did not have symptoms of PhD, but I had symptoms of PTSD. And I had trouble sleeping. I exercised, but I was exercising obsessively to manage my negative emotions. I didn't understand stress management. I didn't understand my nervous system. I didn't understand that there's two branches of your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. In other words, your fight or flight, where if you've ever gotten into a fight, either an argument or a physical fight or something threatening you physically, your heart starts to beat faster because you release adrenaline, your palms start to get sweaty, again, because of the adrenaline. And then you have your rest and digest. That's the other side that doesn't get talked about enough. So it's so easy to trigger your fight or flight. Just watch a outrage viral video on Twitter or put yourself in a dangerous situation, argue with someone. Easy. Rest and digest. We don't get taught that. We don't get taught any of this stuff, but most of us come away understanding what fight or flight is. But we don't get taught, hey, listen, there's a rest and digest system. And also there are ways of triggering it, of activating it to bring your stress levels down. And that's one of the first lessons that I had and why I got into the fitness business initially. I was so in awe that I could go through something so horrible. My family could go through something so horrible. My brother was murdered. And I felt terrible, as you can imagine, worse than terrible. Words don't even describe how low I was. And it was so obvious why I felt that way because of what happened to my brother. But then I started exercising and I noticed something strange. I felt better after exercising, even though exercise didn't change anything about the story of what happened with my brother, didn't bring him back, didn't heal my family. It didn't do anything to my external world. But after I exercised, I felt better. My internal world got better. And we're not taught this. I think this is such crucial information. It's like when you're feeling bad, what do? You point your finger and blame the thing that's making you feel bad. When in reality, there's an internal state that you have and that you have control of. And we're seeing that a lot right now in society where people get offended or angry and let's say the size of the offense or the size of the transgression, it's not really that large sometimes. And we don't realize like this internal state is a big part of the way we feel and that we have so much control over it. And that's something till this day, I remember, I still remember working out after going through not just what happened with my brother and the search for him and the deposition, the trial, all that, but I could exercise and I started to feel better. And then that started this conversation in my mind about psychological health. And one thing that I wanted to talk about is in society, again, we view people who have low body fat and visible muscle mass, visible muscle definition, I should say, those are the healthy people. When I'll tell you, I was working with a group of personal trainers in Miami Beach. We were all lean. We all had muscle mass. Some of them had cocaine problems. Others had, were dating members of the gym. I mean, it was Miami Beach in the late 1990s and early 2000s. It was crazy. We were all partying. It was madness. A lot of money there, just a lot of psychologically unhealthy people there. And actually, most of my clients, they had, let's say, a lot of financial health. They're running businesses, but they weren't happy either. And I wasn't happy because I wasn't making money. And they weren't happy because they weren't healthy and they didn't like the way they looked. Another thing that I learned is the people who I was hanging out with in my 20s. I had quote unquote friends, but my friends backstabbed me. We basically only hung out because we were going to clubs together and doing drugs. But I didn't think about it that much, even though my parents and probably like your parents and probably like their parents said, listen, who you hang out with has a huge effect on you and what you end up doing and how you feel. And I thought, that's BS. I'm too strong. I'm too independent to be affected by the people who I hang out with. And so these were the stories in my mind, the conversations in my 20s that I was having. And eventually, as I started getting older and started diving a bit deeper into coaching and into health, I found the idea or the model, the biopsychosocial model of health. And if you've never heard that before, I want to put this into context for you. If you've ever gone to a doctor and they never asked you about your sleep or about your stress levels or about your exercise habits or about how active you are in your food choices and how healthy your relationships are, and if you feel supported by your friends and family, right? Of course you haven't. And if you have been asked that by a doctor, then whoa, you have such a great doctor. But most doctors don't ask that. What do they ask you? They ask you, okay, why are you here? What are the symptoms? Okay, well, that's probably not a big deal. So just go back and I don't know, don't do anything because you don't have a disease, so we can't treat it. Or, oh, you know what? You have high blood pressure. Here's a pill for that. Or you have high cholesterol. Here's a pill for that. Oh, you're not feeling happy. Well, here's an antidepressant pill for that because depression's a chemical imbalance in your brain. And so taking this pill will provide more of the missing chemical and balance you out. And that's really what, that's all there is. That's what's called the biomedical model. And I don't want to say anything too terrible about it, other than it's not appropriate to apply to people anymore. Okay. And what I mean by that is this. We are, or let's put it this way, only 20 to 25% of our, let's say, our health is determined by longevity. I'm determined by our genes. Sorry. So how healthy you're going to be, it's determined 20 to 25% by your genes. That's the best estimates from the experts who study this. And so what's all the other stuff? What's behavior? And then there's the environment. And certainly, if you're around a toxic waste dump or if you are exposed to, a lot of chemicals, okay. Or if you're in an area, probably more relevant, if you're in an area that has a lot of air pollution, okay. But a lot of the other stuff that affects our health, it's psychological, it's behavioral, let's say. And it's how we live our lives, our lifestyle. So what do I mean by that? Well, behavior is I've had a long day at work. I'm going to come home. I'm going to start with a scotch or a glass of wine or whatever. And I do that every day just to take the edge off. Yeah, I'm overweight or maybe even obese. I don't exercise that much, but I just feel like I need a glass of wine or a glass of scotch at the end of the day just to take the edge off. And then you have your environment. You're hanging out with your friends, drinking beer or having scotch or wine. And you're all doing it together because that's kind of the thing to do. And also, you get less than 5,000 steps a day because that's the average step count for the average American. And so what we started to learn over time is that the biomedical model, it's great. We need to look at the biology of a person, their genes, their current health state, right? We do need to look at clients' blood work or patients' blood work. We do need to look at the various tests that are available to assess the state of someone's health. But we also need to assess the state of someone's psychological health and social health. In other words, your behavior and your environment, who you hang out with, what you do. And I want to tell you something. Part of what we do is influenced by how our childhood was. And I don't mean that at a super deep level, by the way. As an example, I'll use myself as an example. I started working out because I saw my dad working out. I saw him working out when I was, I don't know, 4 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. He lifted these big weights and he used to do curls with them all the time. And he played racquetball. Come to find out later that the big weights that he was curling were just 20 pounders. But I thought, that's how I got into exercise, through my dad. And he had a subscription to Men's Health magazine way, way, way back when. And I don't even think he read them, or maybe he did. I have no idea. I've never seen him read them, but I started reading them because I thought it was fascinating, especially because they had the ripped guy on the cover. And I was like, hey, I want to look like him. So maybe if I read the magazine, I'll look like the guy on the cover of the magazine. Now, contrast that with some of the people who I work with. They didn't have that. Their parents worked all the time. Their parents were out of shape. Their parents didn't exercise. So whether you had a very traumatic childhood or a very loving childhood, it does matter, of course. We can talk about that in a second. But what I'm trying to tell you is our childhood has an influence, whether it was good or bad, on the habits that you have today. And it's something to think about. Not that you necessarily need therapy or anything like that, but that's where our habits come from, or at least the origin of many of our bad habits, let's say. Even today, I found myself, I feel like I'm very different than my dad in so many ways, but I'll catch myself like, man, I spend money like my dad sometimes. Very irresponsible. He would make money as an attorney. He did very well, and then he would spend it. And I'm definitely better than him in that way. I'm an improvement, a 2.0, if you will. But I still find myself doing some of the same things. And I see like, whoa, he kind of abused his body with alcohol and work, and I abused my body with exercise. So even though I had a different thing that I did, a different method of abusing myself, right? It was better in some ways, but now I have all these joint issues because I did it too intensely, just like my dad worked too intensely. And one thing I'll tell you, one shift here is that some of the healthy obsessions that people have aren't healthy at all. I don't want to call it an exercise addiction, like I was living on the street, or in a really bad financial place or doing unethical things. I wasn't robbing liquor stores so that I could pay for my gym membership and supplements. But man, I messed up my body. I even remember when I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I was like, wow, I really want to go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I had a rough day. And just like people would have a glass of wine or a scotch or a beer at the end of a tough day, for me, I was like, I need to go to the gym. So I, by the way, I did used to, like I mentioned earlier, in my 20s, I was still smoking weed. I was still drinking, day drinking sometimes. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of marijuana. But when I started getting away from that, exercise took the place of it. And so I had an unhealthy relationship with exercise. Can you relate to that? Or do you know anybody like that? They're exercising so much, their knees are hurting or their hip hurts and their shoulders or elbow. You're pushing yourself too much because you're going after it excessively or obsessively. Another word that I learned, and maybe you've never heard this before, orthorexia. Ever heard of that? It's the unhealthy obsession with being healthy. I used to be this way. What does that sound or look like? Oh my God, you're eating sugar. Sugar's poison. You're just poisoning yourself right now. Oh my gosh, I just ate sugar. I had some ice cream. I feel disgusting. I just poisoned myself with sugar. Just this sugar. Oh my God, the sugar. It's usually, it's not always with sugar, but that's what orthorexia sounds like because there's no big deal in having a cookie. It's what you do most of the time that matters. The one cookie or the slice of cake or whatever it is, it's not that big of a deal. Or people are obsessed with getting all the chemicals out of their environment. I used to do that too. And I'll even say, I think it's a good thing to do. But the key difference is this. There's an anxiety behind it. Oh my God, did you just use that shampoo from you didn't get the shampoo from Whole Foods and pay, $50 for it? You got the cheap shampoo, which I don't like cheap shampoo because it dries out my scalp. But what they're concerned about is the poisoning. And listen, there is a thing to the amount of toxicity that is in our environment. But I'll tell you this, it's not more powerful, at least to my knowledge right now. And I'm actually taking a course in this and I'll share more as I learn more. But it's not more powerful than the terrible effects of destroying your joints with exercise or destroying your organs with overeating or destroying your psychological health with anxiety. So be very careful because a lot of fitness people, fitness models, physique models, a lot of them either have orthorexia or struggled with it. And it's that anxious obsession with being ultra healthy that ends up, totally destroying their lives in some instances. That's the issue. That's what causes them. That's why they're so motivated to exercise and to, eat so clean. So what I want to tell you is this. one of the reasons I'm doing this, I want to elevate the conversation about health because there's too much focus on exercise and more specifically nutrition. And I'll tell you a secret. If you want to make money in the health and fitness business, you write a nutrition book. You sell a nutrition book. You focus on the nutrition. And I'm not saying that nutrition isn't important. It is important. And I've done many episodes on how the types of foods you eat can influence your cognitive function or many different things. But there's a point of diminishing returns where you're trying to optimize your nutrition 1% more for like a fraction of a percent in return that you won't even notice. But it makes you feel more happy or less anxious because you're obsessing over it. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. And I want to elevate this conversation to start making people aware of the psychological and social effects on health. And I hope you've started to see that. I mean, I've had people come on. I had Ken Honda come on and talk about having a healthy relationship with money. And he talks about money traumas because one of the sources of stress in people's lives, one of the biggest sources of stress in people's lives has to do with their relationship with money. And I'll even tell you this. You might be struggling with your weight. or with your health and you can't bring yourself to exercise, and it might actually be your relationship with money that's the problem. Maybe you're a workaholic. Money's not enough. It's never enough money. The goalpost keeps moving. Or maybe you struggle with money. Maybe you grew up poor or something else happened and you're constantly stressed about money. And because you're stressed about money, you probably spend too much of it. Ironically, that's what happened to me when I was stressed about money in my 20s and my early 30s as well. And you eat too much to handle the stress. Another thing, who you're married to or who you're in a relationship with, huge impact on your physical health and your psychological health. One of the most important decisions you can ever make is who you're going to be in a relationship with, especially if you take that relationship to the next level and get married. It's one thing I learned from my divorce was I need to be with someone who has an equal focus on health as I do. They need to be in the gym every day. In fact, in my last relationship, she was more, she woke up early and went to the gym every day. I was the bad influence on the gym and also in nutrition, which, I say bad influence with air quotes because I'm not obviously a bad influence, but I like to eat more dessert than she did. I like to go out to eat more than she did. For me, it wasn't even necessarily about the food eating out. It was about the experience of being out. And so I know I need to be in a relationship with someone like that. And I can never be in a relationship with someone who doesn't place that much importance on their health. Another thing is if the person you're with isn't paying attention to their health, and that might be you in the relationship, you're going to get sick faster. Or the person who doesn't take care of their health, they're the ones who are going to suffer the most health issues. And I'm not talking about getting the flu or getting a cold. I'm talking about diabetes. I'm talking about heart disease, having a heart attack, getting Alzheimer's. I think about that stuff. When I'm single again, I'm thinking about that stuff. When I look at who I might be in a relationship with and who I might marry. So understanding the balance of all the aspects of life, because if you have, I'll give you a positive one here. I was in the gym. I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and I went up to the very small gym up here on the roof of this nice building here that I'm staying in. Very small gym though. And I was in there working out, and a couple walked over. They opened the sliding glass door, and they had a baby carriage, a stroller with a baby in it. And then they put the baby inside, and then they started working out. I said, I stopped the guy. I was like, hey, listen, I really respect that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody, and I'm sure it happens all the time, just I haven't seen it. But I've never seen a couple, bring their stroller with their sleeping baby into the gym so that they could both train. And I was like, couples that train together, stay together. But what are we focused on? Oh, how am I going to eat? What are the things I need to eat? And I got to eat super clean and I got to work out. Meanwhile, you're in a relationship where the person may not share those goals. Or maybe you're like me and you're the bad one in the relationship. I've had clients like that too. Their wives are super healthy, but they're out of shape. So just understanding all the other things. So if you're exercising and eating well, but you're not feeling good, that's a problem. If you're still suffering with too much anxiety or too much depression, too many episodes of depression or anxiety, something's up. And you can't exercise more or eat that away. Yes, there are some things that you can do with your diet that can help you with mental health or with brain function. And certainly focusing more on aerobic exercise can help with issues with your brain as well. I've talked about that a lot on the podcast. But what I'm saying is eventually you can't do anymore. If you're already working out every day, you're not going to work out twice a day and get twice as healthy mentally, emotionally. You're going to have to focus on something different. Because remember here, the goal isn't to live long necessarily. It's to live well. It's to have a great quality of life, to enjoy your life. And some of us, we're not enjoying our life because we're in very poor shape. We have too much body fat. We're too sedentary, and it's just crushing us. And then there's the type of person I used to be who's exercising all the time and eating well, maybe even too strictly, but they're not handling the psychological and social aspects of health. And to have it all, my friend, you've got to do it all. So what I want to ask you is this: what part of this episode resonated with you and got you thinking about something you should change in your life and your approach to health? And that's what I want you to take away from this and to implement. Because again, if you want, I know you're here, you're listening to a podcast that's called Legendary Life for a reason. I know you're here for a reason. And I'm here to tell you it's possible. And the way to do it is to work on not just the physical, but the psychological and social sides or aspects of health. And you're going to hear more about this biopsychosocial approach. You're going to hear more about it from me. You're going to hear more about it when people talk about, or experts talk more about, longevity in the blue zones. We know that, and if you're not familiar with blue zones, there are areas in the world where people disproportionately live to 100 years old and beyond. Two of the key things that I'll mention is that one is they have strong friendships. They spend a lot of time with people that they care about and have deep friendships. And the other is they have life purpose, have a purpose in life. And there's no workout, supplement, or diet that can give you those things. You're going to have to work on them individually. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I'll tell you, if you think this episode could help someone you know, please share it with them. Let's spread this message of holistic health and longevity. Let's start to elevate this conversation and get better results, because that's why I'm talking about this. I'm not talking about it because it's a nice to have. I'm saying this is the way forward. This is the biohack that you're looking for. This is the next level to achieve. So thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you reach out to me on social media at Ted_RYCE, at Ted Rice, on Instagram or Twitter. Let me know what you thought of the episode, and I'll speak to you on the next one. And on Monday, I have a special interview for you. My guest on the show is going to be Adam Lane Smith. He is a licensed psychotherapist and attachment specialist. But the reason I'm having him on the show is because he talks about something that I haven't heard a lot of psychologists talk about before. He talks about this idea of attachment, and he says it's the root to so many problems today, whether we're talking about relationship issues or people eating due to stress in their lives. He says that attachment is at the root of many of these problems. And the other reason I'm having him on the show is because I like watching his social media channels on Instagram, his videos, and some of his other social media. I really appreciate his philosophy, and that's why I've had him on the show. So we're going to have a great conversation about how your relationship affects your health and even your longevity. To find out more, tune in on Monday. Speak to you then.
That's a wrap on today's episode, folks. We truly hope that you found immense value in our discussions and that these insights will help propel you to that next level of health, regardless of where you are right now. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to this episode, perhaps a fellow high achiever or driven professional in your network, do us a favor and share it with them. You never know how much of an impact these conversations can have on someone's life and success. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Legendary Life podcast. We're on a mission to help you reach your fullest potential, and your support means the world to us. So until next time, stay ambitious, stay focused, and keep crushing your health goals.